Hi, everyone. Thank you for coming out tonight. This is the first public listening session, public info session we're having for our local beach management plan process. So we're really glad that you could join us. For this initiative, Ty & Bond has been hired as our consulting team. So I'm going to hand it over to Rob Adams in a few minutes. This process really kicked off in November 2025 when a group of stakeholders got together to talk about beach management considerations really holistically. We had a 2-hour meeting. And so now we're bringing this to you as members of the public so that you can follow along as to what we're doing and how this planning process is unfolding. This was a council-funded budget amendment initiative for phase 1, and then we have filed, the city of Saco has filed a grant application with the Community Resilience Partnership to potentially help fund the next phase of this plan so that we can do the full plan. We don't know if we've been successful on that grant yet. We'll find out sometime this month, and then we can update you all about that as well. So thank you. I'm going to hand it off to Rob.
Thanks, Emily. Evening. So Rob Adams, I'm a principal landscape architect with Ty & Bond. We're Halverson Design is our landscape architecture urban design studio, kind of nestled within the larger Ty & Bond organization. I have Joe Persicino from civil engineering, and Stephanie is our permitting expert, and so questions that I can't answer tonight, they will hopefully jump up and answer. We also have 2 other team members who weren't able to make it. Pete Slavinsky, I don't know if folks who know Pete, he's with the state of Maine Geology, and he's been a wealth of resource and information on this. We were able to luckily handcuff him and bring him along on this project. He's unable to come tonight. He's probably really the person, when we don't know the answer, we'll have to phone in Pete. So, and the other group is Kirk Bosma from Woods Hole Group, who did some of the initial studies around the Army Corps of Engineers project associated with the existing jetties. So hopefully I'm going to make this as easy and engaging tonight as possible. I'm not a big sitter, so we're standing. So we're going to have a quick presentation by myself mainly, and then we'll open it up to Q&A, and then really the meat of the evening is for you to all provide your input on, I'll say, hopes, dreams, fears around Saco's waterfront. So we have 8 maps that are all to the same scale, starting at the far north edge at Goose Fair Beach or Goose Fair Creek Brook, and runs all the way down to the existing jetties. And they are just simply existing maps with no information on them. Usually at public meetings, I usually scribble some stuff on the maps first, but so just you have full license to draw all over. We have Post-its here. We'll get into all that later, but really hoping to get some information from you. On the left side, my left side over here, there's 4 maps. This one is at a different scale, so don't think you're losing your mind. But this one starts at the north and travels to the south, and it's really about what are the, I'll say, interventions or projects that have gone on in the recent years or are currently on the boards, ranging from dune nourishment all the way to some of the work that is being proposed by the Army Corps of Engineers project next year-ish. We'll leave that be. So tonight, why are we here, right? So I think this project we're here tonight under the first phase to really gather information from you all. So the first phase, as Emily said, this is about gathering information. We're compiling a lot of reports, all the existing reports. Again, Pete has done an amazing job of putting information together. So half of this first phase project, which we're doing now, is just about assembling all the prior information. It's also, as I mentioned, about getting information from you guys. And so when we do public outreach, we like to use this kind of gather, share, celebrate mantra around our outreach, and so tonight's the gather spot where we're just gathering information. When we move on to future phases, we will then be sharing some of our ideas about resilient solutions for Saco's beach. And this is really a catalyst for 2 reasons. One is clearly there's a lot of erosion that's happening along the Saco coastline, And two, the Army Corps project is, the Army Corps is essentially making some modifications to the existing jetty and then handing that over to the city of Saco. And so city of Saco has hired us to kind of think about what does that mean for the city, what does that take on, what should we expect, both dollars as well as efforts. And so half the project is what does the turning over of the jetty mean, but also how can we find resilient solutions for the near and long term for Saco's coastline. We are not talking about any of the solutions tonight. I know I don't have any answers. We have a lot of ideas. We're not going to share those necessarily tonight. Again, it's about hearing information from you guys about what your hopes and dreams and concerns are. And I'm going to kind of start real simply. I don't know how involved everyone is or knowledgeable about shoreline processes, but essentially this little map, this little drawing is relatively simple, but really informative about what's going on. When I use the term sediment tonight, that essentially means sand, right? And so that seems to be one of the big drivers out here on our Saco coastline, which is almost predominantly a sand coastline. So the coastal current is running from south to north, and it's carrying sand. It's kind of erosion and deposition. That's how beaches exist. They're a constant fluid motion that's happening. So Saco's coastline is eroding from the south and depositing sand a little bit further north, and it just continues that kind of conveyor belt down the beach. The jetties, for the last, how many ever years, 70 plus years, have stopped the deposition of sand at that little crux, if you will, where the jetty meets Camp Ellis Beach. And so the erosion is still continuing today and will continue in the future, but there's no deposition that's happening because the jetties are blocking that sand. So we will always be needing, potentially we will always be needing to nourish the beach to some degree to keep that cycle going, right? If we don't supply sand to the southern side, that sand will never get supplied to the northern side. And so this is really about how do we mitigate that erosion that's happening without any supply. So these are all things that we'll be talking about in the next phase, in which we start exploring solutions on how to either slow down that erosion, how do we add supplement, how do we add sand to the cycle. These are all tools that we'll be talking about. The thing that is also, I'll say, interesting or pertinent on the right side here, the spur jetty will help the Army Corps project will help for two reasons. One, it'll provide the spur jetty, which helps reduce the amount of erosion, slows the rate of erosion directly at Camp Ellis. It has a relatively quantifiable percentage that it reduces the erosion. It also is going to be depositing an amount of sand at that corner, which will help then feed that conveyor belt of sand as it moves north. That sand won't stay there forever, and so the question asked to us by Saco and yourselves is like, how long will that sand stay? There's been a bunch of models that Woods Hole Group has conducted. Army Corps has also introduced some models, and so we're going to take all that data and try to calculate that and give the city of Saco some clearer understanding of what that means, how often, how many years apart, how much sand should we really be placing to continue that kind of nourishment as we move to the north. That more or less is the gist of my talk. I will say there's a lot of really great things happening right now. I'm fortunate enough, I teach a studio at Boston Architectural College, a resiliency studio, take our students over to Amsterdam, Netherlands quite often. The Dutch are doing some amazing things over there. There's a lot of good options and a lot of good ideas that are out there in the community. We're going to be putting a lot of those forward in the next phase of the project, and so this isn't it is a dire situation, but it's not an unsolvable problem. And I think one of the things we really want to get from you tonight is some of your, again, I'm going to use the word hopes, dreams, and fears, but what is it about the Saco coastline that's important to you? All of these solutions will come with some sort of cost, monetarily, obviously, but there will also be other costs associated to how we're going to protect our shorelines as we move forward today, as well as with climate change. And so getting understanding from you about why you enjoy the water, why you come down to the beach, what it is about the Saco coastline that's important to you will help us be able to evaluate set up criteria about these future options that we're going to be developing around solutions, right? We could wall this entire space off. There would be no erosion, but we wouldn't have the ocean and the coastline that we have today. And so what are the things we're willing to trade on and off for to have a protective coastline? So that's my part. Happy to take questions for anybody that has questions. We have a mic somewhere. Oh, great. And sorry, we're recording, I didn't mention this. We're recording the first part, so if you please speak into the mic if you have a question, that would be great. And then once we're done with the Q&As, we'll all get up, stretch our legs, draw on the maps, and I think the mics will be off at that point. Sorry. Oh, and there's hearing-assisted devices in the back. Great, yeah.
Can you hear me? Okay, good. Tom Hopkins, I live on map 5 over here. I walk this area quite frequently. Can you explain what I'm seeing in the orange and the green on that map? Is that stuff that's gone away or stuff that's going to be added?
Yeah, great question. So what you see on the map over here, really, I'll just use this, we'll use this map for purposes, trying to identify what the interventions that exist out there today. So the green represents the stone revetment that exists out there. Maybe green wasn't the best color, but green represents the stone revetment that's out there. There's a small, I forgot to introduce also, but York County is also doing an initiative for all the towns within York County. And so part of the York County initiative has identified the stretch between the two existing revetments where it's ripe or ample, or there's a good opportunity to provide some sand deposition to bridge that gap between the two revetments. It's not a big amount of sand, nor is it going to solve the problem, but it's helping provide sand to the system. And then this kind of big orange area is the area where Army Corps is going to deposit sand as part of their project. And the extent of that will be largely determined by the process of the Army Corps project and how much, I'll say, funding or how much available sand. Sand is gold now, and so like where are we getting the sand, how are we going to access the sand, et cetera. And then, as you know, or maybe not know, but Saco, City of Saco has been doing a lot of work at those two intersections of constantly repaving that road, putting in Jersey barriers. There's a project out there to drive some sheet pile to help stabilize that edge as well. And then lastly, if you move north up the coast, there's some existing revetment, sheet pile that exists at that end, and some geotubes that exist or don't exist depending on how deep you dig. So this is essentially a catalog of all the efforts that's gone on to date.
Can I ask some follow-up questions?
Sure.
I've got a couple of them. So that, where those stones, the walls in the green, where there's a gap, there's a beach there.
Yep.
Rather than spending so much money rebuilding that year after year, why don't we put a stone wall right across that? We're literally shoveling up against the tide here.
Yeah, I think that's a very complex act. You're not going to talk to that. So that's part of the York County initiative, and Anchor QEA, a very well-respected alternative firm, has been looking at the entire coastline and looking at some of the weak spots and identified that as a place to put beach nourishment. Again, some of this is about putting in sand to supply the machine. My analogy at some point was, if we just put revetment all the way to Eagle Ave, which there kind of is, there's no sand that's being then supplied to the north. And so now we're going to have increased erosion north of Eagle Ave, and then we'll have to revet that, and then there'll be more erosion, because it's really about supplying the machine and allowing the erosion to move the sand north. And so we always need to figure out where that supply is. Yes, that's a highly delicate spot. Maybe one of our options in the future might be to look at hardening that edge, but right now, from a cost-benefit analysis, doing a nourishment there is the best solution. Fair statement?
Hi everybody, my name is Chris McCall. I work for York County EMA, and we're helping the City of Saco, along with many other municipalities in York County, with the beach nourishment projects. For that section right there that was identified, kind of the quick version of that is that when we're trying to look for funding from our federal government, the one source that we still have available right now is Federal Emergency Management Agency funding, or FEMA. FEMA at least identified that specific area as being eligible for sand renourishment, and that's because of the disaster declaration that happened back in 2024 after those coastal storms. So because we have that funding, we're able to put sand back into that system. Luckily, we also have a county-owned dredge that can help with the dredging operations around that. So that was part of the decision-making process behind that. Definitely a little bit more behind that story, but I think for this forum, I think that's the quickest way to explain that.
And there is a proposed sheet pile that City of Saco is working on just on the east side of, I get my roads mixed up, North Ave there as it turns the corner.
I should say thanks for having the meeting too, first of all. Yeah, that's my biggest concern is North Avenue is getting destroyed about twice a year. All that tar ends up in the ocean, and then it gets spread. Literally, you'll find tar from there all the way up to the metal fence up in here, probably on fence, was that map 3, I think. Chunks of it. I pick it up all the time and take it off the beach. So that's aggravating to me. And then, not to be all negative, but at the end of, I think it's Eagle Avenue, there's some old bags full of sand.
Yeah, the geotubes, yeah.
Why are we covering those up? Just rip them out. Every time I see a guy putting sand on there, I'm like, why are we wasting our energy and money on this?
I don't know the answer to that.
Okay.
Joe, do you have any? Or, yes, they're still serving a purpose.
I mean, there's a metal fence behind it that serves the purpose, and the bag is just sitting there.
Yeah, I think it's reducing the wave energy, but I'll let Joe.
So, excuse me, Joe Brashino, Time Bond. So, I think as we go through tonight, we just have to recognize that there's a number of measures out there that were implemented over the years to help erosion, right? Some of them are either, you cannot hear me? Can you hear me now? Is it better? Okay, thank you. So there's a number of measures out there, as Rob mentioned and kind of displayed on the posters behind us, that were meant to essentially help slow down this erosion. Some of them are functioning, maybe not as much as they could be. Some of them have maintenance requirements, such as the geotube to have sand added on top of it, so it's not being impacted. This is part of the information gathering session tonight, right? So we might not have the perfect solution figured out yet, but we're looking for input from all of you on suggestions such as that. Does it make more sense to get rid of the geotube and find another solution? The other consideration is that, and I think this is where you're going, is with the geotube, there's also an aesthetic component to it, right? And in this case, maybe it's a not good aesthetic component. So this goes to, what do we want the beach to be at the end of the day? And I think we have to find that kind of balance between engineered solutions, natural solutions, and aesthetics of the beach so that we end up with what we want at the end of the day.
Yeah. You'll have to speak in the mic. You got to speak in the microphone or the community won't hear you.
Just the last comment. There used to be 2 of those geotubes.
Yep.
The other one's completely shredded and it's just a mess. It looks disgusting.
Yep.
So, anyway, I'll stop.
All good. Yeah, no, well, this is why we're here. It's like the price is right.
So, may not need this. My question is, when I've kayaked out by the jetty, when I'm kayaking back in, I don't even have to kayak on one side because the waves are going to push me against that jetty. And that current is pretty fierce there, which I assume causes some of that erosion. I understand that there's some sand deposition, despite Christie Nome, that we are going to get eventually. My question really is, though, with the jetty being perpendicular, the new jetty being perpendicular to the old jetty, will that decrease some of that current and as a result keep some of that sand where it is? And do we expect that jetty to cause any increase in sand north of the jetty? Not Pine Point, but just north of the jetty? Do we see any current going along that new jetty that's coming up that will then cause deposits there?
Good question. I think, well, per the models, the spur jetty that you're mentioning, which is 45, I'll come over here because it's bigger. The spur jetty, which is 90 degrees to the existing jetty, it will help deflect the wave energy as it bounces off of this jetty and scours Camp Ellis Beach, right? It won't solve the problem, it's just slowing the rate of erosion. Different models have different percentages of how much it's slowing the erosion, but it does help reduce the amount of erosion, basically, for some of the models, all the way up to Ferry Beach State Park. It'll have an impact on the erosion, on slowing the erosion in that location. That doesn't mean, to the other part of your question, it won't actively generate more sand. It may actively, slightly, because the current is reduced and the sand might be deposited slightly, but it is not a generator of sand, right? What we need, potentially, the answer is there needs to be a generator of sand. And so, yes, it'll reduce the amount of erosion that happens in that location, but it won't solve it. And without having supply, there's really no long-term solution. And the supply used to be, right, if you look in the Google Maps and you look, I mean, there's a lot of deposition that's occurring on the south side of the jetties because that's where the current's going. And once it hits that southern jetty, it just stops and all the sand deposits in that location. And that's the sand, arguably, that we need. It's way more complex than that. As a landscape architect, I'm giving you a very simple solution, but that's essentially the answer. Yes, it'll help slow the erosion, and relatively significantly, it'll help slow the erosion, but it won't significantly increase the amount of deposition that occurs in that location. And that's why Army Corps is having this kind of huge, hopefully huge beach nourishment that happens associated with that project. Yeah. Yes.
For a while, is that jetty going to be done with the new technology with wave altering devices, or do they still want to put solid rocks like the old jetty?
I have no idea, to be honest, what the composition of the existing jetty is. I don't know if York
Well,
or...
I meant, so suppose these wave, I've forgotten the full nomenclature for them, but those are those devices that actually have 90-degree cuts inside the jetties, and they actually build up, and actually after a while you can, they become permanent.
I don't know. I don't know if
Anybody
Will
else can
knows
help me on
or...
this? I know it was a discussion. Supposedly it's cheaper than what the Corps of Engineer was planning.
We'll look into that.
The wave altering devices, nobody else?
The question is, do we know what the construction of the Army Corps jetty is? And my answer is, I don't know what the construction is. And I also want to be clear, like, I'm not here to argue the quality or quantity or the right move of the Army Corps jetty. Like, that was a long, drawn-out process, and we hit a Venn diagram of the best, most resourceful, most impactful, most buildable solution. And so what the jetty is made out of, I can't say, and we're not going to, at least our project is not going to reevaluate the use of that jetty. But having said that, we'll definitely reach out to Army Corps and try to understand what the construction of the jetty is.
Another question. You mentioned the steel wall along North Avenue.
Yeah.
That's essentially a monetary solution, correct? Because it's not going to preserve sand. It's going to help stop flooding of the streets, hopefully, and hopefully stop North Road from washing out. But it doesn't do anything to keep sand there, except it doesn't flow over to the streets during the nor'easters.
Yeah, you could argue that it prevents sand from going into the road, which then gets swept up and carted off or pushed back in. But no, it's not a generator of sand. It is helping to keep North Ave in location. Marginally, it may help maintain some sand, right? But it is not itself a sand creator, no. Sure.
The marshes are an important part of this whole beach management system. Has there been any consideration to getting some of the sediment that seems to be stacking up into those marshes and putting it back into that, the beach part of the system?
Yeah, we haven't looked, I mean, there's some significant marshes, sorry, both on the backside of the coastline, but also here west of the pier. And I think those are things that we'll be looking at as opportunities and how to create a more viable ecosystem. Right now, it's not part of the toolkit, but I think it will be something that needs to be considered as part of the overall alternative solutions. I mean, I think all of us are interested, I'll say all of us are interested in thinking about, as Joe said, aesthetics, ecology, you know, land, maintaining land, and so trying to balance all those things. I think the marshes will definitely play an active role in that. Yeah.
Would you be, hi.
Hey.
Would you be willing to look at the existing jetty and see if, and maybe look at perhaps some modifications to that jetty in hopes of maybe discovering a sand source or a way that we could actually get sand to come from the riverside into the
Yeah.
ocean side? Is that something that you can,
I
or is
can't-
that just something that the Army Corps has to do without, nobody can tell them you should do this, so we,
I don't know, my 15-year-old son said, why don't you just get rid of the existing
Well-
jetty? And I was like, well, yeah, I suppose. But I don't know, I think it's an option on the table. Like, I don't want to say that when we move into the next phase that we're going to start ruling out options. Obviously, there's a pros and cons benefit cost analysis, benefit cost analysis associated with that. But yeah, that could be an option that's on the table. I mean, obviously that impacts navigation. That has a whole pulling of the sweater kind of concept to it. But yeah, that could be a viable option that at least is worth studying.
also, you wanted to know what we thought was important, and I think one thing that might not be on the surface, but it's not only the quantity of sand, but it's the quality,
Yeah.
and that we would really like to see, I think, an improvement in the appearance of the beach. You know, the beach has been ravaged brutally the last few years, and a way to keep it so that not only do we have sand, but the sand that we have is something that, you know, isn't filled with chunks of tar or
Yeah.
rusted out street signs, et cetera, that there's, part of the plan will be to maintain and manicure the beach as well as build it back.
Yeah.
So, I
Yeah.
mean, I think that's something that I think everybody in this room would subscribe to.
Yeah, I mean, sand is the new gold in many ways, and so getting quality sand obviously is a priority. So, yeah, agreed.
That's all I have.
Great. I think one thing I didn't mention, it's probably worth mentioning, and it's not on this map per se, but also further north, as we get further north around the dune sections, I think what all of us are seeing is that, you know, dunes were essentially a natural system, a natural armor that when a big storm came in, they would take a lot of the energy, obviously get damaged, but when it was a 50, 100-year storm that occurred 50 and 100-year cycles, like the dune had time to reestablish itself. We're now seeing storms with a higher frequency, higher intensity, and so the dunes aren't able to essentially do what they're made to do. And so that's another part of the project that we'll be looking at in the next phase is what opportunities are there to help these dunes recover more rapidly, or what sort of mixed gray and green solution might be available to us to help the dunes recover or maybe withstand some of the intensity of the storms. Because it's not just, like, the project is not just about Camp Ellis, which is clearly important, but how are we protecting or utilizing the dunes further to the north, and how can we assist with the kind of increased storms and increased intensity of the storms that are not allowing the dunes to regenerate. So that'll be another part that we talk about alternatives later. Yes, back corner.
Good evening. Thank you
Evening.
for all this. David and Kevin, I assume you're here. This is Paul Trahan. I live on 36 Main Avenue in Saco, Camp Ellis in particular. I've been here for 36, going on 37 years. Some of you have been here a little bit less. Some of you have been here longer. The original jetty was built 1856, 1858, and if you pay attention to it, it's gone both east and west in terms of the storms, in terms of its iteration. Circa 1963 was Margaret Chase Smith and sadly Edmund Muskie who helped get the funding for what you're looking at now. The 1938 configuration, which was lower, so you couldn't see it at mean tide, and for those of you that grew up here, which is not me, it had what we called the holes in the jetty that would go 50 feet of stone, 50 feet of open space, 50 feet of stone. That allowed the 16,000 cubic yards of sand that are yearly deposited at the jetty by the pier. That's not my figure, that's the Army Corps of Engineers and the Maine Geological Survey. That's their figures, and that was the iteration of the jetty that allowed the beach to be what it was when I moved here. My late father-in-law was chief hydraulics engineer for a multinational corporation in circa 2004 when the Army Corps came up. And again, some of you were involved in writing the grant along with my wife and myself and others from the original SOS group. We all went down to, we sent people down to Vicksburg, Mississippi, where the Army Corps built a scale model of the jetty. Oh, they forgot the jetty, and they forgot to put in the river and the 16,000 cubic yards of sand that are there every year that are deposited just outside of where Ewitz is right now. I don't know what's going to happen, but my father-in-law, when they came out with the 6 or 7 point plan back 2004, 2006, as a result of their study, pointed out that the one single thing that will not work is the project that you are all talking about, and that's that north-south jetty spur. It won't work. It won't. We have the little baby spur jetty that they put in God knows when. That didn't work. It hasn't helped anything. The one thing that will work, which is what Dave seemed to be suggesting a few moments ago, is that will the Army Corps of Engineers be willing to go back to the one iteration that did work? That was the 1938 configuration. It wasn't great, but it allowed the beach to continue to be the beach. It allowed the river to stay the way that it was. And it didn't happen with all the erosion that we're handling now. Again, when we moved here in 1989, there was a dune at the end of Main Avenue and North Street. It was a dune with dune grass. In the 1991 storm, the city of Saco, Larry Netto happened to have been the public works director at the time, sent somebody at midnight to bulldoze all the dune grass that was there. I don't know if any of you remember that. Anyways, I'm skeptical about a north-south spur. I've heard iterations of the sand way back when it was first allowed. The first appropriation for funding for here, which is going back almost 20 years, well, yeah, about 20 years, 2004, was going to have 396,000 cubic yards of sand deposited on the beach. The last time I heard anything, they were now talking about $47 million worth of project. That's the stand. And the jetty spur going north-south for 750 feet. And now only 96,000 cubic yards of sand. Hopefully I'm wrong in all counts, but I've done a great deal of study. I don't know if any of you remember Chevy Chevalier, who was harbor master. At one point in the early 1990s, I had access to information going back to 1886. Unfortunately, I did not have access to a copier to do all of that, and I don't know if that has all disappeared. But there were people complaining and talking about the jetty and the spur causing the erosion going back into the 1880s. I'm talking about lawyers from Boston who owned property here at the time. So there's a great deal of history. that's involved here. Again, the first iteration was 1856, 1858. The last iteration, the one that we see, was from 1963. Again, Ed Muskie and Margaret Chase Smith, they did that in the hope that it would help us in Camp Ellis and whatnot. It's caused tremendous erosion. In the 36 years that I've lived here, they've armored the beach. Most of what you see now did not exist back then. Many of you have looked at Camp Ellis Remembered. There was something posted within the past couple of weeks about a postcard from, had to have been 1970 or so, and it showed hundreds of feet of beach that no longer exist. And it's because of the armoring of the beach going north-south. Without getting too psychological here, those of you who know what a Rorschach test is, if you take and look at an aerial photograph of the jetty and the erosion on the beach, they are hand in hand. They're mirror images of each other. When going north toward going towards Old Orchard, where the armoring of the beach stops, do those people have problems with flooding? Yes, they do. But does the beach stay? The answer to that is yes. Are there damages to their home? Some of it is major, most of it is minor because the water just comes and goes. It's where we've armored the beach and lost the beach that there's a problem. So if you need any further information about the history, I'd be glad to help.
Yeah, that would be great. We've been fortunate. State of Maine has been very good about sharing documents. Woods Hole Group, Army Corps. As I said, part of this project has just been gathering all the prior reports, creating an executive summary, which helps give Saco as well as the community some understanding of what has transpired in the past. So if you have documents, if anybody has documents, photographs, we'll figure out, Emily, a way to get people a way to upload that information. But it would be great to gather any information, documents that you guys have. Thank you.
The question I have is Pine Point. I know when I was boating, I would come out of Pine Point and you have to go forever before you can get to deep water and get out of there. Is there not a solution of dredging that up and putting it on a barge and bringing it back? I mean, is that a possibility, or is it not cost effective, or?
Yeah, I think there's, again, when I know that some of the work that York County Initiative has done has started to look at, and maybe even the Army Corps has started to look at, of supply locations. I know that's been part of the conversation. It's a long way. There's a lot of sand that exists on the other side, on the south side of the jetties, and so I think all sand sources are completely viable. And I will agree, it seems like at one time it was Saco sand. I think that's a little proprietary way to think about it, but yeah, I think all sand sources are obviously open, giving regulations and cost issues. So I don't think there's any reason why we wouldn't consider that in the future, or why Saco or Army Corps or whomever might consider that in the future. Yes.
Hi, Kevin Roach, president of SOS Saco Bay. First of all, I want to thank for this great turnout, everyone here. I was not going to speak at all, but I want opportunity for the public to ask questions and not have a history lesson for people who don't participate in moving things forward. We are in 2026 now, and time for action is now, and we appreciate as much feedback as we can for a proper beach management plan. Thank you.
Okay, my question is, I'm Lynn, and my question is, what consideration has been given to the biodiversity and the wildlife of the area in this project? If you could,
Yeah, good question. Pete actually connected us to a couple of State of Maine inland fish and wildlife group, and so obviously any design that we come up with in the next phases will have to weigh the regulatory process part of that will obviously be wildlife habitat. And so, as Joe has said and I have said, like, I think that's one of the legs of the stool is, aesthetics, probably many legs to the stool, but like cost, aesthetics, wildlife value, right, ecology, biodiversity. These are all things that are clearly going to be part of our considerations as we move forward. And as I said, like, no solution, every solution is going to have a cost, right, wherever we go. And so hearing from you all tonight about what your priorities will help Saco, help us start to develop and weigh these options in the next phase so that we can get a better understanding of what the community's priorities are.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Hi, Christopher Yanni, 25 Miranda Circle in Saco. Going back to the beginning, I think I'm just not clear on the end game for your organization, because it almost sounds like a numbers game. We're going to get a spur jetty, that'll slow it down by X percentage. We're going to try to run up to Pine Point and steal buckets of sand, and that'll put in, Y cubic feet.
Yeah.
Is it a numbers game? I mean, when you walk away at the end of the day, what will your organization hope to have accomplished?
So I think that's a great question. I think what Saco would like for us to accomplish, all of us to accomplish, is, right, the spur jetty and the work that the Army Corps is doing is in many ways a given, right? We're not here to debate that project necessarily. What Saco wants to understand is when the jetty now becomes Saco's responsibility, what does that mean for us from a cost, time, effort? Like, how should we start planning this into our capital improvement and ongoing maintenance, right? So that's one part. Like, what does it mean now that we have this thing, right? The other is there's clearly erosion that's happening along the coastline. What are our viable can we get a list of viable alternatives, right? Like a toolkit of, because the other part is there's no singular answer to any of these problems. We're not going to just run a revetment along the entire coastline, right? We're not going to try to build a dune along the entire coastline. So creating a series of toolkits and weighting those against a variety of criteria or priorities, right? Like, this option or this solution has a dramatic impact on water quality or wildlife, but is very economical and is easy to install and is durable, right? There may be other options which are more costly, have higher ecological benefits, might take longer to permit, whatever it might be. So us ultimately trying to get together a series of toolkits to allow and locate them, because the beach is not the same the entire length of the beach. And so one solution may work better in one location, other solutions may work better in other locations. And so it's a two-pronged solution, getting to your answer. One is, what are we getting? What are our issues? How do we maintain it to keep it to where it is today? And then what are some design alternatives that we could look to in the future? And Stephanie will also help us understand what that means from a grant and from a regulatory process to give an outline to how we may move forward. So what did we get with the jetty, right? And what are some options for us to move forward and make improvements to help secure the shoreline? We're not gonna, at the end of our project, maybe we will, but I think it's a 3-phase project, essentially. This gathering phase, second phase is coming up with solutions and alternatives, and then the last is essentially issuing the report and putting it out there. Future phases may be like, okay, we're gonna do, area A, C, and F, right? And we'll put some grant money together, or whatever the funding is, but it'll essentially, hopefully, be a roadmap that Saco can use to move forward and start to implement that. And that'll have to be part of the solution too. It's like, we're not gonna do all this at once. And so prioritizing areas, prioritizing solutions, both short-term and long-term. Obviously it's a relatively complex solution, but essentially giving a roadmap to how to preserve the shoreline is the objective.
Okay, thank you for that. And I also wanted to add, by the way, I feel less silly now your 15-year-old stole my original question. Because for what it's worth, it feels like everything else is playing a sword fight with popsicle sticks. We know the problem's the jetty.
It is.
If there was a way to make the first 1,000 feet of jetty a perforated line instead of a solid one,
yeah,
there you go.
But clearly it wouldn't solve everything. As I said, like, the dunes are getting battered at a rate that they haven't been before. And so, like, it's not as easy as just getting rid of the it's a natural system that wants to move all over the place, and we've put parameters around it. So we're always going to be fighting it a little bit, but yeah, like there's some things that could definitely help, right?
You've clarified a number of times very well that none of this is going to add deposition, and that's the rub.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
For those who are interested, there's a great project in the Netherlands called the Sand Motor or the Sand Engine, which is this amazing project. Take my students out there whenever we go out there, and they've just dumped this. They've moved the tipping point on beach nourishment. They've actually created a new kind of ecosystem by putting so much sand, and it's now the sand engine that feeds the beaches to the north. It's a really amazing project. So when you get home tonight, Google, not now, but when you get home tonight, you can Google sand engine. And the Dutch have done some really amazing stuff. So anyway, sidebar while we're waiting.
So who's coordinating the efforts between Biddeford, Saco, Old Orchard Beach, Pine Point, Scarborough, and actually, for that matter, the entire southern coast? Because if we look at the New Jersey coastline, one person would put up a groin, and that would save his beach, but the person on the other side of the longshore current, that would be eroded, right? And so so who's doing the coordination that, hey, maybe we can get our sand from Pine Point. Pine Point might not want that, it's great sand. But, who's doing the coordination, helping with, making sure all the plans are cost effective? Maybe we save some money by working together, and versus just having our own little, blinders on, because the jetty is the problem. How do we work on it?
Yeah, you're right. So it's not a parcel by parcel solution. There's no parcel by parcel solution that exists. It's going to be a multi-stage answer, but part of our initial report is also other case studies in which there's been public-private partnerships, or at least infrastructure guidelines set up by municipalities so that when private individuals go to do individual work, everyone's working towards a consistent master plan, right? So we're not providing the master plan within this phase, but we're at least putting forth some places that it's worked successfully. So that's one thing that I think is really important. The other is we've had some great meetings with the York County Initiative, Will's team at UNE. We've had one, as Emily said, 2-hour kickoff meeting in which everyone just kind of brain dumped all that they were working on, and it was super successful, and we were able to gather a lot of information. The work that York County Initiative is doing, you can correct me when I'm wrong, is that they are trying to be a little bit of the watchdog to say, here's some of the priority spots, flood pathways, whatever it might be, and trying to come up with a cohesive system and be a tool for these communities to try to work together to get some sort of results. I think ultimately what Saco would like to see, as you say, is creating this master plan so that whether it's state or city or privately funded, however it happens, obviously state of Maine is going to have to permit all of these things, and locally and probably federally. And so there's a number of watchdogs so that people aren't going to be able to kind of disable their neighbor to the north in this instance. So I think the goal is to create a unified plan so that people are working and moving and marching in the same direction. That's one of the primary objectives of this. I should have said that. So thank you for raising that. Yeah.
My name is Deborah, and I live on West Ave in Camp Ellis. My question is, what's the time frame for this? Is this going to be a living document, or is it going to be once and done? I mean, how is this going to evolve, and when can we expect to see something?
Yeah. You want to answer that, Emily? Uh-oh.
So every plan we do is a living document. So we will anticipate that this will be a living document, but right now we're just doing phase 1, and we're asking for input from everyone so that we can make a stronger document. And then the phases after this, we applied for grant funding, so we're waiting to see if we get those grant funds.
So when can we expect phase 1, which is where we are now, right?
Yep, so go ahead and explain phase 1. I just want to give you the
Yeah. Yeah, so phase 1 is, like, tonight is a little bit of the culmination of it to some degree. So we've been working, as I said, organizing all the past data and projects and information, cataloging that, putting together the case studies. Michael Larner from our office, who is in here, has been analyzing Wood's whole group, and soon will be analyzing Army Corps' model to understand what the impact, what's currently going on, a little bit of this diagram, but more complex, and what will be happening after the Army Corps intervention. And so it'll, I think there's 5 or 6 chapters, right? So case studies, existing reports, existing coastal processes, the regulatory process. I think that's it. Anyway, probably in the next 3 weeks, we'll have a final draft to City of Saco for their review. And it'll be essentially the launch pad. The part that I didn't say is, after tonight, we like to do a what we heard document, try to either graphically or verbal or written text summarize all the information that we got tonight and give that to City of Saco in this instance, and it becomes a document that the city can share, whether on the website or however a city shares information. But we found it to be a useful tool to then, in phase 2, if we go there, like in the share part of this community engagement, that there's this, here's what we all heard together, and here's how the design alternatives reflect that. But to answer your question, the next, let's say next month, we'll have some final documents for City of Saco. I think behind you.
Just more of a long-term question than a short-term question. This is, fine for the short term, maybe the next 20 years, assuming a static environment. We don't have a static environment. We have sea rise. And I think the oceanic, whatever it is, from the federal government says that by 2050, there'll be a 1.5 rise in the ocean feet in our area. By 2100, there'll be a 4 to 4.5 foot rise, conservative. Is there a larger scale plan for that kind of mediation for more than just Saco, Maine, East Coast, West Coast, et cetera?
So I'll speak to some of our other work, primarily City of Boston. City of Boston has set 2070 as their target elevation, which is around 30, 40 inches of sea level rise and a 1% storm event. So not designing a barrier or protection or whatever for a sunny day, because that's really meaningless. And so using a 1% storm that potentially happens once every 100 years, but it's not really that. But a 1% storm with 3-ish feet of sea level rise is what City of Boston, and mainly the state of Massachusetts, is using as their target elevation. You have to set some amount of data. We haven't really established that target yet with Saco nor state of Maine per se, but I think that is going to have to be part of all of these solutions that I talked about, the toolkit, right? Some of them are going to be short-term solutions and some of them are going to be long-term solutions. And as you say, the long-term solutions are going to bring a lot more intervention, a lot more dollars, a lot more changes to the topography. I think we've all talked about not talking about managed retreat. And so I think our intent is to put forth, again, this is future phases, put forth solutions that maintain the existing, plus or minus maintain the existing coastline. But as you say, like 3 feet of sea level rise is not an insignificant amount. And so we'll have to incorporate that into our solutions. Some of them, solutions may be modifications to existing structures, existing properties, right? It won't solely be, at least some of the options won't solely be waterside or right on the intertidal zone. They may have to be further inland as well. But again, like those are things that we're going to flesh out in the next phase of this project. But you're right, like climate change is not, we're struggling now to keep the beach at 3 feet of water, and it's a significant impact, obviously. I don't have the answer for that. We should really end on a more cheery, a cheery topic than that. Okay. Oh, yeah, yes. Were you listening to classical music while you were?
Excuse me?
Were you listening to classical music while you're, okay.
I'm 78 and change, and I hope to be here in 2001 when we're talking about that 3 feet rise in sea level. At least that's my plan. Again, going back to what David had suggested about 25, 30 minutes ago, was that is the Army Corps willing to entertain the fact that the 1938 configuration of the jetty is the one that worked to the benefit of everyone, which means, again, lowering it, putting in those 50-foot, I'm going to call them holes, because I don't know what else, that's what a lot of the locals that I've, in the past 36 years that I've grown up with, refer to it as. Is that a possibility too? Yes, no? David?
The Army Corps has hinted that it would be willing to look at modifications of the jetty. I'm not sure how much I want to take them at that, but I don't think the door is closed by any means. But I'm not sure how that would be initiated or how it would happen, but I don't think the Army Corps has totally closed the door on it. I think they would probably, if you came to them and said, you know, we need to find a sand source, and lowering the jetty or poking a hole in it might be the best way to do it, they would at least listen to you.
Again, we're not this phase, we're not coming up with solutions next phase. But yes, like, again, like, we're not going to limit ourselves to reality, but we're going to not limit ourselves to any options that seem viable. And then we're going to run them through a series of sieves to see how viable they are from a economical, regulatory, wildlife habitat, right? Stability, short and long-term solutions. So, but again, next phase. Yes? How about we do this?
Thanks. My name is Lynn Copeland, and I live on the Ferry Road right around the corner. And one of my neighbors here has talked about the wildlife. We have endangered piping plovers. They're federally, on the federal endangered species list. So that's an important thing to us. Just wanted to point that out. And we have a state park is what that is. We also have a state park named Ferry Beach State Park, and we have Ferry Beach Park, which is a different place. So they both have erosion on the ocean.
Yes, thank you. I'll make you walk this time.
This one's super quick. I think you or somebody else mentioned that at the end of the spur jetty and the end of the project, the management of the jetty then gets turned over to the city. What does that mean exactly? At the end of the day, in 10 years, who owns the long slab of concrete?
I think that's a relatively complex question. You said it was short. My understanding, Travis isn't here. My understanding, I could be wrong, but it's still going to have, Army Corps is still going to have some oversight, we'll use that word, of the jetties. I think the actual maintenance of the jetties will belong to the city of Saco. If I'm incorrect on that, then we'll get more information, but I think that is the answer.
Maybe I'll ask the silly question. I'll just bottom line it. If in 10 years the state decides they're going to fund dynamite and blow holes in the jetty, can the federal government sue the state?
I don't know.
Can they? Okay.
I think it's a tangled web.
Okay. Thanks.
Hi, my name's Allison Hurley. I've only been in Saco for, 8 years maybe? But I think what I realized about Saco is the beach, it is so unique in the different parts and the characteristics. So I think as we go through these planning meetings, it's important to keep those characteristics as much as we can while still protecting everyone's homes and the environment. So I think that's a very key component to this problem. That's
Yeah, agreed. I think, I'll just speak. We feel fortunate to work on this project. Like, it's an amazing stretch of beach. It's an amazing piece of land. Like, it's a great community. We're really happy to be here. And so I echo, as an outsider, so to speak, I echo that sentiment that it's a really special place, and so we're thrilled to be working on it. Yep.
Again, thanks for having this meeting and taking a lot of comments. At the very beginning of the engineer in me wants to know. So at the very beginning of the meeting, you talked about the spur jetty having a quantifiable reduction in the erosion. Do you know what that is, or can we get that information? And so the follow-up to that question would be, knowing that I can't remember what the term would be, but the gentleman with the baseball cap is alluding to it, that we're just going to have to keep on adding sand. It's like, so knowing that reduction amount would help understand what the rate is being reduced to and what it's going to be for costing, and what are we actually talking for cost? So.
My answer is it depends on the rate of erosion, right? How much it reduces it. And it depends on which model you look at, right? Like Woods Hole Group is amazing. They have done modeling of the almost entire eastern seaboard. I give Kirk a hard time that he's creating more climate change by the servers that they're running these models with than what they're saving. Sorry, Kirk. But the answer is don't know exactly. It definitely has a reduction on the amount of erosion, and the numbers kind of vary depending on what model you look at. That amount of reduction reduces the further north you go because you get out of the zone of influence of the spur jetty. Your other question, and so yes, like that is the point of when we deposit that sand, how much did we gain ourselves? When Army Corps built that spur and we now deposit sand, how much in theory did we gain ourselves? And so one could do the calculations of today, if we spend $100 every 10 years to put sand in and the spur jetty reduces the erosion by 10%, then we spend $100 every 11 years, right? So we could make that assumption, and once we get some more modeling from the Army Corps, we'll be able to run those numbers and give Saco a range of how much we think it's going to cost on a yearly basis to maintain the sand and maintain the jetty, because the jetty will take some work as well, and so that's part of the problem. I don't know. I used $100. It's clearly not $100. Okay. We can pass the plate later if it's $100.
I don't mean to push you, but to back up his question, I'm not getting you to make a promise in front of a room. It'll be 41%. I know there's different models.
Yeah.
Is it one model says 7% and another one says 5%?
Oh, no.
Is it one says 80 and one says 60?
No.
What's the range?
They're in anywhere from 10 to 30-ish, depending on what model you look at, and it depends exactly where you're at, right? Like, so these models are not perfect because you can't pick an exact point, but it's a significant impact that the spiral that the spur jetty has on the erosion and right at Camp Ellis.
Okay, thanks.
It seems to be a worthwhile exercise. Now, storms are not, right? Storms are a dynamic kind of solution, and so if we get the perfect storm or whatever storm, right, like that, all bets are off. But there definitely seems to be a reduction on the rebound wave energy off the jetty. Okay, great. So a lot of good information. We took a lot of good notes. Post-its, and there's stars. I know we have stars up here for reasons I don't know. But anyway, love if you guys are willing. Post-it notes, markers. I'm going to draw right on the board, so people feel free to. But we'll be here as long as you want to be here, up until a certain point. But happy for everyone to come up and draw on the maps. Tell us about your favorite place on Saco Beach, what your concerns are, hopes, dreams, fears, as I like to say. And thank you very much for coming out. Sorry we don't have all the answers, but I think everyone acknowledges trying to work together towards a common solution. I think the gentleman's comment on how are we moving forward together, I think, is the key. And so I appreciate that comment and that question. So thank you. And Emily, do you want to say anything about getting information, or is there a place to post?
So if you have anything that you want us to take a look at, or to consider any documentation or photos or anything, you can send it to administration@sacomaine.org. Again, that's administration@sacomaine.org, and we'll make sure that it gets to the proper place. Thank you. Yep, we'll have a page, and we'll make sure that that's live, as you know, that gets distributed in the city newsletter as well. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Again, please don't hesitate to pull our ear or leave notes or whatever you want to do. Appreciate it. Thanks, everybody.